Have the pleasure of introducing Brooke Patton.
It's a big red flag to us that something hormonally is happening.
Does neurofeedback help your sex drive?
Have really high anxiety or a lot of sleep problems.
We need to constantly exercise.
Any of the hormonal changes aren't going to show up the same for a man.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out the unfiltered truths about menopause with a little sass and a sprinkle of craft. I'm Courtney Mamusha, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dawn Fable. As two women on this menopause journey, we're ready to dive into the wild world of hot flashes, mood swings, and all the other joys of being a queenager. By no means are we medical professionals, so please consult with your doctor before doing any sort of treatment. And now, to introduce today's guest, I would like to turn it over to my co-host. Go ahead, Don.
Hey, thanks so much, Court. You always do a great job of these introductions. Such a small world. I have the pleasure of introducing Brooke Patton. And Brooke and I go back many, many years, back to high school, even before high school, growing up in the same neighborhood. Her father was a teacher of mine, and Brooke and I were very fortunate to reconnect recently, and she's doing some incredible things. Brooke is a professional counselor who has specialized in trauma, domestic violence, anxiety, depression, PTSD. Brooke is also married and very, very passionate, not only about her husband, of course, but about first responders. Her husband is a first responder, and that has really led Brooke into a very interesting field of neurofeedback. Brooke is one of the leads at Braincode centers. So we've invited Brooke today to the podcast to learn a little bit more about neurofeedback and what happens to a woman's brain during menopause. So Brooke, welcome. It's such a pleasure to see you. We're so happy to have you, and we're interested to learn more. So tell us, what is neurofeedback?
Great question. Neurofeedback is a way to train the brain to function better for itself. What we do is the initial brain map is a QEEG. So we gather all of your brain waves and see what's going on neurologically through your 5 dominant brain waves, everything from sleep to fight or flight. Then we look at in the brain where there's overactivity and underactivity and in which lobe that's going on in the brain. That gives us a really good snapshot of anything from depression, anxiety, trauma, just brain moving really fast, dementia, anything you can think of. And as we go over those results, and then we put together protocols where we retrain the brain through operant conditioning. I always give the caveat of the easiest way to explain it is kind of how you train a dog. You give a dog treats when you train it. Essentially, that's what we do to your brain. So you've got 2 different rewards. You've got auditory and visual. You have headphones on and you're watching Netflix. Sounds pretty counterproductive. But as you're doing that, depending what we're inhibiting for overactivity or what we're rewarding for underactivity, as you're watching Netflix, you hear different tones and sounds that are correlated to each brainwave. And then the picture on the screen fade in and out depending on those reward-based system. So, for example, if somebody has a lot of fight or flight, a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks, they'll hear kind of a beeping noise and the picture on the screen will keep fading in and out. As their brain starts coming out of that fight or flight or getting trained to work appropriately, you'll hear less of that sound and the picture on the screen will be clear. Through that repetition, what we're doing is we're teaching the brain new ways to think and new ways to learn, i.e. coming out of anxiety. So we do that through process of a system that we call Amplitude that we train clients on. And through that process, we relieve a lot of mental health symptoms.
That's so incredible. There's obviously a huge pandemic within our world of mental health. And I know so often physicians are quick to prescribe SSRIs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, those sorts of things. This is really more of a holistic approach. Is it to be used in conjunction with that, or can it be an alternative to that? And I know that's a fairly loaded question because you're not a physician and each person is very individual.
For sure.
But what's your thought process around that?
Well, obviously it depends on the client. We do have a lot of clients that come in and are on an SSRI or have had treatment with an SSRI and haven't got a lot of movement. So typically what we do is obviously not a physician, so we don't prescribe or anything like that. But our goal through neurofeedback is to train the brain to work better in place of that SSRI for the most part. We have a lot of people that come in and don't want to be medicated and have really high anxiety or a lot of sleep problems is something we deal with a lot. We start the neurofeedback process, and through the process, as the brain kind of starts healing itself, we talk about tapering medication. We talk about if somebody isn't doing well, what we can kind of manage in terms of holistically going with the SSRI and neurofeedback. So yeah, I love that that's a loaded question, but I get that asked a lot. A lot of people in this pandemic really don't want to be on medication for the most part. And so it is a more holistic way of healing the brain without going on medication. Like I said, we have clients that start the neurofeedback process on SSRIs or any type of medication with the goal of getting off that medication through the process. So we manage a lot of that. We also collaborate a lot with psychiatrists, other mental health professionals as we team with them to make sure that client experience is the best it can be. But to your point is we absolutely live in a very medicated world, and our goal is to approach mental health and healing in more of a holistic way of healing.
That's amazing. And I'm sure we'll jump into this, but thinking about how to break free from, the push drugs that the physicians are prescribing. And I think a lot of us are looking for more holistic ways to approach our own, medical journeys. What would you say is a typical time frame or commitment to this? Is it sort of like a one-time brain mapping? I mean, I know we don't just drop our dogs off once and be like, they're trained, hallelujah.
Absolutely.
So a longer commitment and something you look at like as a year long or ongoing.
Yeah. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. We talk about that a lot in the field. We like to see clients twice a week for 40 sessions. So kind of depending on schedules, and they're with us from 9 months to a year for the most part.
Wow.
Most of our team is counselors as well. That counseling piece with that mental health piece becomes kind of a 2-for-1. So to say, we do like a check-in and check on symptoms and then train. So somebody is with us anywhere probably on the lower level, probably about 9 months. On the higher level, a lot of people, especially first responders that are constantly re-traumatized on the job, go through our entire program and then go into what we call kind of a maintenance or a taper phase, where they will still come see us once or twice a month just to kind of fine tune and make sure all of those brain waves are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Also, once you've done neurofeedback, your brain really craves being trained this way, similar to a workout or a diet regimen, right? Your
Similar
brain's
to
being
my
challenged in a
wine
different way.
regimen.
Right. Exactly, right? We're not going to take that away from you right away, right? But so we taper very slowly down off neurofeedback as well. We do have clients, especially kids. Kids are sponges. They train very fast because they don't have all the blocks or the trauma that we have as adults. So kids can kind of be in and out in like 9 months, really.
So who are your
Adults
typically
tend to kind of stay on.
Yeah, I was going
Go
to
ahead,
ask,
Doc.
who are you typically seeing? Is it what are people coming to you for? You mentioned anxiety. Obviously, there's PTSD. You mentioned, seeing children, sleep issues. What are the most common treatments that you're seeing with your patients?
That's a great question. We really see the entire gamut of mental health. We see anxiety with children. We see a lot. We do a lot of work with ADHD, dyslexia, autism. That's actually what got me into the field. When I was getting my master's in mental health, I had previously been a kindergarten teacher and saw the need for mental health for kids instead of medication. And as we change those brain waves, a lot of those symptoms, that social anxiety, that learning capabilities of kids change pretty drastically. So I would say pretty much across the gamut of mental health, we see anxiety, depression. We see aging is a big one that we'll talk about on here. Aging's a big one. Definitely any type of IEP symptom that a child is on. Anything from speech to cognitive delay to dyslexia to ADHD to autism. We see a lot of kids dealing with a lot of behavior, but a lot of behaviors because those brains are firing at a very fast speed and we need to control that. So kind of to your point, we treat anything under the mental health umbrella.
Well, you are a real angel, not only being a teacher, but then going into this field. And more importantly, your passion in really wanting to help our first responders and everyday heroes. So thank you for that.
For
God
sure.
knows that we as women, as we enter this perimenopausal and menopausal state of things, our brains are a bit of a mess. Can you talk a little bit? There's hormonal changes that accompany menopause, and oftentimes those can be manifested in sleep issues and delay cognitively and mood swings and brain fog and many psychological, physical, emotional, neurological changes. How does a premenopausal brain look in these mappings, and how does a woman who is dead in the heat of menopause look?
Literally.
It's
Yeah, totally right.
yeah. And it's really interesting is this is kind of an interesting niche that we've kind of been asked about a lot lately. And I think it's just given population wise, especially with moms that have kids and they're sitting in the waiting room and they're like, I should probably do this too. Can this help me? And we do have a lot of families we see which is awesome. Really in the brain, menopause actually manifests a lot in the brain. All of those sensors, right? All of those sensors are misfiring, i.e., hot flashes actually originate in brainwaves. They are telling your brain to cognitively react in fight or flight because they're just misfiring at times. So a lot of times in these maps, we see overactivity in our absolute power. So our absolute power, we look at two different kind of power lengths when we look at these maps. We look at absolute power, which is just the amount of power your brain is putting out at one time. And then we look at relative power, which is really our meat and potatoes of symptoms. How does that power feel to that person? If we see somebody that in that absolute power is so overactive, right? Really 3 standard deviations where the normative database is, this is a huge red flag to us that something hormonally is happening, especially with females. We will see their absolute and their relative power not match, right? Their symptoms are there, but really they're just like coming out of their skin. And they describe it that way, right? I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm depressed, I'm irritated, and I just don't feel good.
Yeah.
When we see that overactivity, it's a big red flag to us that something hormonally is happening. We also see it in teenage girls a lot. When teenage girls first start their period and all of that, and their parents like, no, they're just going crazy. I'm like, no, their brain is actually on fire at this point.
Wow.
You see similar maps in those populations where hormonally our brain is just going, I can't fire correctly. So we see a lot of overactivity, especially in that absolute power. We also have 5 dominant brain waves. Delta is our sleep one, and then theta is really our transition wave into sleep. But that's where our memory, our cognition, all of our kind of life experiences, and really all of our thought processes, right? Organizational skills, all of that live in the kind of that slower band, but it's really, really important to function. We'll see a lot of overactivity in that theta band. This is always emotional reactivity to things, feeling brain fog, really feel like you're walking around kind of out of a body experience. And so we'll see both of those things. We'll see that overactivity in that theta band, and then we'll also see their absolute power just going crazy. So that those two together are a huge red flag that something hormonally is happening with that individual.
I wonder if it's
crazy.
Yeah. I was thinking being kind of somebody when they first come into you and looking at their brain map and then looking at multiple sessions with you and how literally their brain is changing right before your eyes would be.
Yeah, I just had a great, we call them comparison reviews. So kind of a lot of people, right, although they're feeling better, they're kind of think, I don't know, is it this? I changed my diet, I'm feeling better, or is it the neurofeedback? Usually after 40 sessions, we'll have them remap. And then we've got the before and after. I just had a woman yesterday, works for human services for Douglas County. So obviously a very tough job, as we all know, going into the summer and kids that are already pretty and her new map looks like a completely different person. She feels like a completely different person. And, you know, it's one of those that I love doing those comparison maps because those people are feeling so much better, but then you see such a healthier brain where she was a prime case of overactivity in theta, really irritable, really just felt like she couldn't keep her stuff together, you know, was really just off the walls with stress, and things would send her into tailspins. She's also about 45 years old. You know, all of that comes in. And she and I were joking yesterday. Now she'd like to get her husband in because she said, we need 2 regulated people in this household, not just one. But she, you know, she has stories all the time where things that they're doing home improvements and it's taking a lot longer than she wants it to. She said normally without neurofeedback, she would have lost her mind. She would have been yelling. She would have been crying. She would have been really upset. And now she's like, we'll get to it when we get to it. You know, it'll get finished. And
it sounds like every menopausal woman needs this, truly. I mean,
for sure.
Sure.
I just think our bodies go through so much, not only as women, period, but then you throw kids and you throw stress into it, right? Is our bodies constantly trying to adapt to what we're going through. And unfortunately, when we're in these pre-menopausal and menopausal phases, is our body's really going, I don't know what to do. And that's why we feel so dysregulated and irritable. And you know, as a mom, right, you can't feel that way all the time. You know, what mom am I getting these days, right? So yeah, that regulation and that ability to just breathe is a huge thing that neurofeedback gives people in general.
Joking aside, does neurofeedback help your sex drive? Because so many women, perimenopausal or menopausal, really struggle with the loss of libido.
You know, we don't have any studies on that, but what I have heard from clients is that it's that ability to just be more present with yourself and be more self-confident, which has really helped that libido in terms of, you know, being okay with being in your own skin and knowing everything's going to be okay. I feel like when that libido's lost, right, we really are internally looking at ourselves and what our problem is or how we look or how we do any of that. And we all know men don't care, right? They don't care what we look like, right? They don't care, but we do. And what I've heard a lot from women is we've given them the ability to see themselves and have that self-confidence back, which in turn increases that sex drive because you feel more comfortable being you.
And you're not wanting to bitch slap them when they try to have sex with you, right? Because you're a little
Right.
more, your fight or flight is more manageable. You
For
know,
sure.
you're dealing with those mood swings, I would imagine, through this neurofeedback. This is so fascinating.
It's such a cool field. When I first heard about neurofeedback, I was like, oh my gosh, no way. This cannot be a thing, right? And really getting trained in over the past 5.5 years, seeing those changes, right? And seeing all of that come to fruition. But that is my favorite part of my job is we do really make people's lives better. And really, once you're through the program, 40 sessions of neurofeedback has been clinically proven to just stick, right? It's permanent change forever. So when we talk about that medication management and kind of that dart in the dartboard, I hate to say that, but I always, right? Medication works very different for everybody. Some people, it doesn't work at all. Some people, it does great and they function really great on it, right? But that long-term effect and changing medication and weight gain and stuff like that really makes medication change a lot. So knowing that we can give these people a healthier life with a long-term effect, yes, you're going to be with us for a while. You're going to get to know us really well. But in the long term, your brain's going to be healthier for the rest of your life.
I've always been a big proponent that it's mind over matter, right? So if somebody is like not happy, kind of going through what they're going through physically or mentally, and they just can't get out of their heads, then it's harder to really heal. So it's interesting hearing from you that really mind over matter does exist and is actually proven scientifically to like help get through a lot of these ailments and causes things happening to our bodies. You mentioned, sleep deprivation, and we were talking about weight loss. And, I think when you think about things in a different way and your brain is processing, then you're probably approaching life very differently. And that's like the ongoing result that you can get from doing something like this, neurofeedback and brain mapping to see where you can start and where you can finish.
Yeah, some of my favorite, we call it a fast alpha brain, but your alpha is your gear switch. And we look at it in two different ways. It's kind of your sense of homeostasis, right? But it's probably the most important brainwave you produce because it's your neutral, right? And so we look at it in those two different gear switches. We look at slow alpha into that theta that we were talking about and into sleep, right? And then we look at fast alpha, which is our gear switch into cognitive ability or go, right? And
Both
so
of those switches seem to be off these days.
Yeah, right.
I was gonna say, can we start like going out and instead of asking people their signs, like what's your alpha switch?
Right. What's your brainwave? Yes. Yes. I see that in couples a lot. It's funny when one person does it and then the next couple gets mapped and they said, we had our brain maps out at dinner and we totally understand why we don't communicate the way we do. Right.
I mean, it has to be like an alternative or maybe cheaper and more effective than marriage counseling, right? Because if you're literally retraining your brain.
The more regulated a household is, the better we are, right? So, I think it's really interesting to see once people understand and kind of see their own map, you have a different perspective on yourself, for one. And it's very validating to a client, whether it's a 7-year-old who's struggling or an 87-year-old, right? That what's going on neurologically actually matches up with what's actually going on with you from a day-to-day basis. So our map review process, when we go over the results, people are so validated that they're not going crazy, right? These things are actually happening neurologically, and now we fix them, right? But people feel very validated.
With so many of us in sort of that sandwich society, I think is what they call it, where we're trying to parent our children's, we're parenting our children, and then our parents are aging, right? In a lot of cases, or deceased. How does this play into, or can it be prevented for optimizing your cognitive function for aging parents? And can it be, really quickly, have there been any studies on sort of this as a preventative measure for something like an Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that?
Absolutely. We work with a lot of memory loss, especially on that memory loss side, and then also kind of correlate to like traumatic brain injuries, right? We work with TBIs a lot as well because they mimic each other a lot in symptoms, right? That forgetfulness, that feeling very disconnected. We've had dementia patients come in and train, and it doesn't alleviate all of their dementia, but actually that recall is a lot better, that organizational skills. I'm hoping that we will eventually get to a place where we have a lot of studies on preventative. Definitely in the first responder community, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get people brain mapped when they're in academies before they start seeing all the trauma, to kind of get a baseline so we know what's going on going into all of that before all of the trauma that they see and deal with. So definitely not a ton of studies yet, but definitely we've dealt with a lot of memory, kind of building that memory back up with neurofeedback and working in that cognitive delay, and really putting a lot of, we call it neurofeedback, but obviously a lot of that training specifically on getting the brain, the right and the left side, to talk better to each other, building that neuroflexibility so that memory and that cognition stays for a long time.
I was reading this on your website or something that you sent me over, and it's like our bodies, right? We need to constantly exercise and strength train for our bodies, muscle mass and longevity and all of those things. Our brain is very similar, I would imagine, in terms of that elasticity and optimization of exercise of the brain. Is that essentially what this is doing?
Essentially, yes, absolutely. It's brain health. It's exactly like you're saying, working out or anything. You're building that neuroflexibility so you're able to go very easily from sleep to cognition to relaxing to being able to deal with everyday stress. Is we're just building that network to fire better for each individual.
Can you neurofeedback my vagina?
I wish. That would be awesome. Not that I know of.
So there's,
That would be fun,
and there's a
though.
way in the future, maybe.
We might be onto something, ladies.
There you go.
Oh,
Teach
New
your vagina to
market,
do
new
all these
market.
wonderful things, right?
right.
And we can literally see our crazy brains changing through menopause.
For sure.
The thing that Hot Flash Health and both Courtney and I have set out to do, I think as a society, and, as we were, our mothers didn't really raise us to acknowledge or advocate for menopause or feeling better. 100% of women will go through menopause, and we've all just sort of accepted the fact that we're going to feel very mediocre during this time. And that's not the case. Yeah, that's not the case. There are tools like this and many others where women can go in and advocate for themselves and feel validated that, yes, in fact, my brain is having significant changes because of the hormonal imbalances, and this is what it is manifesting in. And you literally have data that is showing, yes, this is happening.
Right. And another one that we partner with too is we partner with a couple functional medicine doctors too, And I don't know how well versed you guys are on functional medicine, but definitely that holistic way of healing.
Yep.
I know personally, I've got my hormone levels tested lately. While we were going over the results, she was like, I don't know how you're awake. You're definitely going through premenopause. I don't know how you're functioning because your cortisol levels and all your hormonal levels are so low. And by treating that with natural supplements and doing all of that as well, that journey, I definitely did food allergies and went on that journey with her. But as women, we don't self-advocate because we're taking care of everybody else, right?
No.
We're always left at the end. And I always joke that I feel like breastfeeding is one of those conversations as well, that nobody warns you about breastfeeding and nobody tells you how hard it is and that it hurts and that it's a lot of work, right? Your day is on a 3-hour schedule all the time, right? And I really love that you guys are advocating for females to really do a gut check with yourself. I joke all the time with being married to a first responder. He gets his physicals every year. He gets his cardiac stuff every year, right? Your kids have to go to the doctor and get their physicals for school, right? Who calls a mom and goes, hey, you haven't been in for a wellness check?
Yeah.
Unless you're doing birth control or, an IUD or something, or you're pregnant, right? Nobody really calls you and goes, hey, Brooke, we haven't seen you for a couple of years. Maybe come get some blood work done and see if you're okay.
Or you feel
That
like
never
you were just
happens.
there. You're like, I was just there. And they're like, oh, that was 5 years ago. You're like, oh,
Right? But nobody ever does that, right? Nobody ever checks all of that until we're this age, when we have to get mammograms and when we don't feel good, right? And now we're like, oh my gosh, somebody help, right? So I love that you guys are advocating for that because I just think, one, we don't know who to go to, right? I have a sister that Dawn knows very well, same age as her sister. And we were having this conversation and then we kind of cornered my mom. We were like, when did you go into menopause? And she's like, oh, and we're like, early. And then we're like, it's a conversation you should have with your daughters, right? This is a
right.
conversation we should have. And we're not having this
Really?
conversation because our parents' generation never talked about it, right? Nobody ever did any of that. So yeah, definitely building that community around self-advocating and that you're not alone. Everybody's feeling like crap. Let's try to fix it together is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'd say there's many benefits of not feeling mentally crazy because many of us do going through menopause. And, like you said, our brain's on fire in there and things are firing and unfiring. And I feel like Donald Trump's fire in my brain, like fire. But maybe give us one to three, benefits that doing this would help somebody.
Definitely that brain fog, cleaning up that brain fog, right? In that theta band, people feel like they're really walking in clouds. Through the neurofeedback experience, I've had clients tell me the sun got brighter. Birds are chirping louder. That's not the case.
That's
right?
not much.
We didn't change that, right? We didn't change that. But we've lifted that fog, that mental fog so much that you feel like that changed, right? And definitely that patience and irritation and just that going day to day, whether it's driving kids to sports and working and doing the laundry and then, right, then your husband still wants to have sex with you. And you're like, okay, no, nobody gets anything, right? Is definitely that organizational piece and that irritability and just that mood stabilizing is life-changing for women just because we constantly are going from thing to thing to thing. If we can make that experience easier for somebody, that's a win in my book.
With Father's Day coming up, it sounds like we should really get a lot of the fathers or husbands in our lives or partners in our lives a brain mapping for their wives or for the females in their life. That sounds like a great idea.
Right. That's a great idea.
The
That's
key
a
to how-
great idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Hey, does a man's brain look different than a woman's brain?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, there are differences, right? Males and females are very different. When we do the initial map, our normative database is based on gender and age, right? Any of the hormonal changes are going to show up the same for a man. Their absolute power is not going to look completely overactive, right? So definitely those hormonal changes affect a map, but we definitely see a lot more of that absolute power being just depleted completely in females than we do males. Also, stress levels, we see a lot of that emotional reactivity to things, a lot different in females for the most part. Males, for the most part, either live in that fight or flight and don't talk about it, right? Because they don't want to tell anybody they have anxiety. That's not manly to say, right? Or they're just burnt out, right? They're just burnt out, where females really feel the emotional drain and the emotional brain fog very differently. So yes, we do see a lot of those changes on those maps. Male and female maps are pretty different where that over and under activity is, just because our brains function a little different.
I was thinking you were maybe going to see some huge pair of perky boobs in a man's brain map, and
It
a
was
woman's.
crazy.
Yeah, a
And
woman's
ours
you
are
see
just all over the place. Yeah.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
have a to-do list where men see boobs.
It's like your dicker.
Ours are just hanging with everything we have to do, and theirs are just hey, they're here. Yeah.
Yeah, very simple
Absolutely.
creatures, really. Well, Brooke, you've been so amazing. So, you are an incredible resource at Braincode centers. I know that you have physical locations in Dallas and here in Colorado, but you're also able to do this virtually. And you do have programs where people throughout the United States can work with you. If someone were to be interested or wanted to take a step forward and learn more about Braincode centers and what you do, what are some of the programs that you offer and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So braincodecenters.com is our website. We do free consultations where we meet with people and just kind of go over exactly the process and kind of talk about, what they would want out of neurofeedback. We have an office in Highlands Ranch, and then we have an office in downtown Denver. We also have an office in Tulsa and Dallas. And then over the past couple of years, we've built up this remote program as well. So the initial map needs to be done in an office. And then what we do is we actually send out, it's like a really cool headband, but it has your sensors on it. And what you do is you actually train remotely. We put the app on your phone and you train remotely from home. So we have people all over the country that train remote, and they have a coach that they meet with each week, as if you would do if you came into the office, where you have a primary clinician that works with you, touches base on protocols and goes through all those symptom trackers and everything with you virtually. So you actually can train from anywhere. That's been really popular, just given hybrid work schedules. And we have people that have deployed, and wanted to continue neurofeedback. So we have all of those resources on our website. The easiest way to do it is just fill out the survey online, and somebody will call to schedule a consultation. And then from there, we kind of walk you through the process. So that is the easiest way to find us. We're also on Instagram, braincodecenters.com. We also have a YouTube channel under Braincode that will show you exactly what a session looks like, what before and after maps look like, what it kind of looks like to do neurofeedback, all of that. And then we've got a lot of testimonies as well online that just attest to what we do and how it's been a life-changing experience.
That's amazing.
And I think Brooke will do mind mapping for you and I, and then she'll put it up of what you shouldn't look like.
These are very brain map. Yes,
Very
we
bad,
have
very
a
bad
lot
map.
of work to do.
I was wondering, I was
Absolutely.
actually thinking, man, I would be screwed if she did a brain map with me today. I had a bottle and a half of red wine last night. I was with all my tennis girls,
Yeah.
all the stress of school getting out and like everything happening. I mean, it would be one disastrous brain. I do have one more question. With so many of us as parents who have children that are struggling with the technology addiction, and technology really seems to be taking over our children's lives these days. Do you see a difference in mapping with sort of sensitivity or anything as it pertains to technology devices?
Absolutely. We have a lot of people that come in with technology is actually a diagnosed thing these days, technology addiction with kids in terms of being on iPads, and you try to take them away and kids lose their mind. And it's an interesting slope, I think, especially kind of the older my kids get and that kind of stuff, where school, all of their stuff's on the computer, right? As we say, don't play video games, but get your schoolwork done, right? And we saw that a lot during COVID when they were going to school online. So we actually see a lot of irritability with kids that are addicted to technology, a lot of distancing socially with that as well, which turns into a little bit of social anxiety and not being able to interact with people face to face. So we do see a lot of clients that come in and they're like, we've got to get my kid off this iPad. A lot of that obviously is kind of retraining the brain to adapt to things and kind of have patience. But we do a lot of psychoeducation on just educating parents on boundaries with technology and not taking it away completely, but definitely having those boundaries put in place. But we see a lot of that misfiring neurologically where the brain's not able to re-regulate itself very easily. So we do work with that a lot, but technology addiction is a huge, huge thing that's probably not going to get a lot better, to be honest. It's just a matter of educating on how to set those boundaries with kids.
What about a Netflix addiction?
Right, right. Well, it depends. If you're watching it for neurofeedback, it's okay. No.
Wow, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. We tell people a lot of time too with sleep problems, right? Is TVs in bedrooms, right? Putting your phone away before you go to bed, all of those things, which are really hard things for people to do, right? But it makes a huge difference on sleep, is using your bed just for sleep, right? Not letting your kids
Sleep
do their
and
homework
sex.
in their room. Sleep and sex, if we have time for it.
Hopefully the other way around.
Sex and then sleep, right? Yeah,
Well, I guess it's the morning. I don't know. It can work both ways.
totally.
Work either way.
Tomato,
It's fine.
tomato.
Auto.
Oh gosh, Brooke, well, you've been so wonderful and such a huge resource. And thank you again for what you do, because certainly it sounds like it is much needed, not only for a middle-aged woman, but for children and aging adults and these first responders. So we appreciate what you're doing and are so thankful that you spent some time with us today. And if you're looking for more information, again, braincodecenters.com. Braincodecenters.com. They're on Instagram at braincodecenters. And certainly you can hit us up and we'll put you in touch with the very best Brooke Patton. So don't forget
Thank you so
to
much.
Court.
Like us, follow us, share us, send us messages, refer us, be more like us. Us.
Love it. Love it.
Oh,
Well, I love that you guys are educating people and making that voice for women. So continue your hard work too. And I really appreciate you guys having me on.